Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. It's Monday again. It keeps happening, thankfully. Anyway, today's topic is suffering, and we'll be getting to that in just a minute after we take a couple moments to settle in and become present. Let's just take a deep breath in through your nose. Hold it and imagine all that wonderful oxygen coursing through your corpuscles and through your veins and into your organs and out through your body. And exhale any tension and stress. And take another deep breath in through your nose. Now imagine just this brilliant, bright, sparkling light coursing through your being, through every molecule in your body. And as you exhale any remaining tension. And now let's just gently place our palms together and softly rub your fingers against your palms so that you can feel the tickling in your fingertips and in your palms, and just how delicious it is to have that kind of sensation and be here in the physical right here, right now. So welcome. Anyway, it is a new week. And time keeps marching on. What we're going to talk about is suffering. And I've heard people say, and I've actually said myself, suffering is optional. But a lot of us don't experience it that way. So what is the nature of suffering? My sense is that suffering is generated in large part from judging, from resisting, both. So we suffer when we don't allow ourselves to be where we are, to be in the moment where we want something else, when we decide that things shouldn't be the way that they are. And when we have those thoughts, then we project those thoughts into and onto our experience, and it creates this resistance. It creates a perpetuation of the discontent that we might be experiencing. Even with physical sensations, our suffering is expanded or extended by our resistance to those sensations, by saying, I don't want to feel this way, I shouldn't feel this way, I want to stop feeling this way, and we go on, and that is where the source of our suffering is. Sharat Singer is with us this morning. That's great. Welcome. So glad to have you here with us. So we're talking about suffering and how suffering is optional, and the antidote. Good morning, Dido. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here. The antidote to suffering is presence, and releasing any resistance that we have. And resistance is generated by thinking that things should be different. The shoulds are a good source for suffering, because it shouldn't be this way. It should be this way instead. I shouldn't feel this way. I have an expectation that isn't being met, and therefore it creates upset and resistance and consequently suffering. So even when we're experiencing physical sensations that are uncomfortable or excruciating, even being present to the sensation, being present in the moment, is different from suffering. Feeling the pain is feeling the pain, whether it's physical or emotional. When we have a commentary on the pain and we add a mental overlay that incorporates judgment or expectation, that's when that's when the suffering starts. And that's how we perpetuate suffering, is by taking on the notion that things should be different. And so I have thought about the way that our culture values suffering. So, for instance, when we hear about another person's misfortune, we often respond with deep sadness. And then that can be elaborated by talking about how it breaks my heart that such and such is happening, or such and such is occurring in the world. And I experience that as much as the next person, to be looking at circumstances that I really, really believe should be different. So I'm making a judgment, I'm projecting an expectation, and as a result of that projection, I experience suffering and sadness. And so, in saying suffering is optional, we get to look at whether our suffering is being directed in a way that is going to create a positive outcome. So, or to create an impact. For instance, when I say it breaks my heart that something's happening, if I am moved and inspired to action from that deep sadness and suffering, then that's great. That's great for taking an experience and converting it into an action that is life affirming, potentially, hopefully, right? An action that's life affirming. But if I am just simply being heartbroken, if I am simply suffering, then we get to look at, is that a state that I am deliberately and consciously choosing? After a point, we get to wake up to, hey, I'm suffering. Now what? What am I doing? How am I creating this suffering? It all goes back to our own sovereignty and our own ability to choose, and the call to be conscious, to be mindful. Sometimes we are overtaken by emotion, and that emotion just is so big as to blind us to anything beyond it, and it feels like it will last forever. And in those moments when we're experiencing that emotion, we're not necessarily aware that we're suffering. If we're in the emotion itself, we're in the emotion. It's when we step back from that and say, I am in this emotion and I am suffering. That's when the emotion gets another dimension of energy laid over top of it that helps to hold it in place. In being in the emotion, again, I've said this so many times, but being in the emotion allows us to transcend the emotion. When we resist the emotion, when we try to tamp it down, that's when we embed it. That's when it becomes more deeply entrenched, because it's being pushed down, so it goes deeper and it persists. So the trick with emotion is to experience it when you're experiencing it. And the notion of suffering is something that we overlay. Suffering's an interpretation. Suffering is an a construct, this notion of suffering is a judgment or an interpretation that allows really difficult, painful circumstances to perpetuate. And what I was saying is that culturally we value suffering, so it's like, I'm going to suffer through it. I'm going to tough it out and I'm going to suffer through it because that's what's expected of me, or because that shows that I have an open heart, or that suffering shows that I'm compassionate. And the thing is that, and this came out of a conversation really that I had yesterday with someone who was saying, in thinking about somebody else's life and their choices and where they are in their lives, they were saying, it breaks my heart. And they don't express that they're brokenhearted to the person whose life they're brokenhearted by. And I said to them, well, your brokenheartedness, how does your brokenheartedness help you or help the person that you're brokenhearted for? And there was no way at all that this was a productive feeling. Not that all feelings have to be productive, but this brokenheartedness and this suffering that the person I was having the conversation with was having was not motivating them to take positive action. It was not doing anything other than eating away at them personally. It's kind of like when we're angry at somebody or holding hatred for someone and wishing them ill. What happens is that anger and that hatred is harming us and incapacitating us. And so it's like drinking poison to kill somebody else, which is what anger is. And suffering is no better unless we allow it to motivate us into something that is a positive, life-affirming action. So Dido says, I love that you're making a distinction between pain, the emotion, and suffering, the layer of interpretation on top of the emotion. That resonates with ancient Buddhist thought. I did not know that, Dido. Thank you. Thank you for that. Yes, there's a big difference between experiencing our experience and then creating the interpretation or the dialogue that then either deepens or alleviates our experience. And so often our interpretations and our judgments and our resistance are expressed through our languaging about the experience, taking us out of the moment. It's a commentary, and that commentary deepens the experience of suffering because it's one step removed. So it goes into the statement that I recall very vividly by the Dalai Lama, which is, all suffering is the result of misconceptualization. In other words, it's the way we think that creates the suffering. When we're present, and I know I'm saying it again and again, but it's so important, and it might be hard to wrap your head around, is when we're present, there isn't the commentary. There's a sense of quiet, even in the pain. In the pain, it's sheer pain. In the sadness, it's sheer sadness. In the anger, it's sheer anger. It's when we create the commentary on our experience, and when we resist the experience that we're having, or we believe, we add dimensions of how we want things to be, how things should be, how whatever our concept is, our construct of reality that we overlay on top of our experience, that then becomes the source of suffering. So, and we commiserate with each other. So this is like a cultural norm that we talk about how terrible this is and how terrible that is, and isn't it a shame that this is happening, and how endless the problems are, and as we talk more and more and more about our problems, we create more and more and more suffering, right? And there's sort of the misery loves company idea, is when I'm down and out, then you sitting and being with me and telling me and how, or supporting me and being down and out, and how terrible the circumstances are, then we get to suffer together. And it's ironic that we find some of our greatest connection with other human beings through shared suffering. What would it be like if we could find communion with one another through creating possibility, and through creating joy, and through creating enlivenment and upliftment? And so I invite you to be alert to when you're suffering, and notice what is the commentary, what is the internal dialogue, what is the conversation that's going on inside that is creating and perpetuating this experience of suffering that is actually a dimension beyond the actual pain that might be there. So I think that actually might be it for today. Just inviting you to look at whether you have granted merit to suffering for suffering's sake. And if so, what if you were to give yourself the choice instead to opt for something like joy or happiness or peace or possibility? And we do have these choices at any moment, and they become more apparent as we become more keenly aware of our inner inner dynamic and how we generate our internal experience. And we can make a choice at any moment to go in a different direction with our internal conversation and our intentionality. So the intention to be awake and to be conscious and to be present is where we keep coming back to. The more we get to be present, the richer our lives become. And I think that's it for now. So it's Monday, and we start the week off with a way to transcend suffering. And in this time when so many of us are experiencing hardship and difficulty, if we can bring ourselves present in the moment, it is a powerful, powerful way to be navigating difficult waters. So this is the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin, and we're here on Enlightened World Network. Please check out the wonderful programming on Enlightened World Network for upliftment, for connection, for insight, and lots of love. Love from me to you, and great thanks and appreciation for you joining me. And I hope to see you again tomorrow here at 9 a.m. Eastern on Enlightened World Network.